we have Gibson Nichols. He's going to be talking about Amazon Web Services. I've been looking forward to this one. This should be really good. So have at it, Gib.
Hi, I'm Gib. I'm a computer addict.
Hi, Gib.
I knew someone would come back. So I've been working with Linux since the Driscoll days in 1991. Built my first computer in 1977. And the other month I was talking to Jim about options for coming up with presentations and stuff. And I've been a member for a long, long time. And really want to give back a little bit. So I mentioned to him that at work they sort of thrust this Amazon AWS thing on me and said, you're responsible for this environment now. So I've been sort of supporting this for a little bit, and I told everybody that I don't know much about it. It's kind of new to me. I'd maybe learn a little bit as we go along, and so we're hoping that I've learned enough to do a presentation. So I was offering to do a 15-minute presentation, right? So I thought, okay, I'll demo how to create an instance in Amazon AWS. So Amazon AWS, for those that who have been living under a rock or whatever, is a service provided by Amazon. Amazon, that retailer that sells all kinds of stuff and does a really good job about that. They looking for other types of work to do, and one of the things they found is because they were building up this big data center and stuff to do their retail sales, that they had expertise in that, and so they decided, hey, we're going to provide services to other companies so that we would run the hardware, and then you don't have to do any of that. You could just request services from us, and basically they've been building this thing out for a while, and they just keep pouring more and more stuff into it. It's just amazing the number of services, and they have more coming out all the time. So, for example, was it the third column on the top here? This AWS IoT. So, Internet of Things. That's a buzzword that's becoming real popular nowadays. So they come up with, and it's funny when they do this. They seem to come up with their own names for stuff. They don't use the typical name. So I was real surprised that IoT was called IoT instead of some fancy name that they could brand. So they call the thing an instance instead of a virtual machine and things like that. So you have to sort of learn the dictionary as you go along. So as you can see, there's a lot of stuff in the columns here, and some of this I've been working on this for like 3 months now, and I only know a few of them. So the one thing that I'll probably show you real closely here is the EC2. So this is the place where you actually can request an instance and get one running, and so you're basically running a computer that's out on the cloud. So someone said, well, cloud, that just means someone else owns the computer. And yeah, okay, but you're getting a lot of services for that. You're getting a lot of things that you don't have to do that they can do for you. There's all kinds of other services, and you can see there's like a little description, like a one-line description of things. Elastic Beanstalk is managing web apps, and this Lambda is. So it's funny, oh, we got this new service, it's for scripting whenever you get some action item that happens. So it's like well, gee, we've been doing that on all the other computers I've known for decades now. Some file arrives, and now there's an event that you can then act on, and there's a script you can run. So this is a big thing for them, but of course we've all been doing that. S3, for example, is their storage in the cloud. So that's just basically saying disk space, So it's a simple storage, okay? Simple storage, SS, and I don't know what the other one S is, but then they have a bunch of other things here. So they have these things called elastic. Instead of calling like a IP address a static IP, they call it elastic IP. And I think probably the one thing I would caution everybody about when you're getting into this, if you want to start up an instance, is this is the one key thing I'd let you, if you walk away with just one thing, remember this, that when you start up an instance, it gets an IP address, right? It gets a name, an IP address, like all computers, right? So now you can address that and connect up to it. When you shut down that instance, that IP address goes away. So you start it up again, you get a different IP address. So that IP address that you got the first time, somebody else gets that. So if you write documentation or procedures or anything, say, here, connect to this IP address, and this has happened. We've had someone say, gee, I can't get to my instance. Well, and that's really bad. It's a harmful thing. But one of the tricky things was, where I work, you have to register IP addresses that you want to connect out to, right? And it was like a new thing that we had just implemented. And so now you had these IP addresses that were being registered so that, we'd have good IP addresses that people had, signed up for, well, that were being sent to someone else. And now it could be someone who's bad who gets that IP address and it's already registered as a good IP address, right? So a couple little things about, making sure that your IP address isn't something that you bake into all your processes and stuff like that. Instead, you could purchase a service from Amazon called an elastic IP. That's what their static IP address. So now you pay a little bit each month, and you get to use an IP address that stays the same all the time. But you have to pay for that, okay? So that's the one thing I caution you to be aware of. Now they've done all kinds of other services here. They have their own database system, and they allow basically something called Glacier, which is like long-term storage. You've got to do like a backup. You're not going to try to retrieve that information. You don't need it very often. It's not something you want right away. So if you can live with throwing data somewhere, leaving it there for a long while, and not retrieving it, and if you do need it, you can wait a day to get it, then Glacier is a really cheap place to store data. I think it's like 1 cent per gigabyte per month. So, good off-site storage kind of thing, if you can accept the premise that storing data on a cloud environment is okay. We just had a big discussion about, the legal implications of this, and one of the things was what the lawyers call discovery, right? So this is one of the things that's inhibiting a lot of people using cloud services, is you have a situation where if someone comes after you in a legal sense and says, you have to provide all the data to us, well, what do you tell them? Well, I got this IP address. Well, so that's not going to work too well, right? So you have to be aware that discovery is an issue for the cloud service. Now, of course, Amazon is quick to say that they have banks running their businesses on Amazon. So after I offered to come and do this presentation, my company sent me to the Amazon Summit in Chicago. So I spent like 2 days looking at all this stuff for several hours and do all these presentations and good stuff. So I have my 10-page description of that event that I've written up. So it may last a little bit more than 15 minutes. So let me start off by indicating that again, there's a lot of other services. I didn't even get to like Direct Connect. So at one point I was talking to someone at the summit saying, well, we have a lot of data we want to transfer. Do you have any services that would help us with that? And I said, well, how much data? I said, well, about 4 petabytes a day.
Okay.
At 50 sites. And I said, well, go over to that table over there. There's a service called Direct Connect. And Direct Connect is basically another company that they purchase or they work with that goes around and drops fiber into companies. And they then do the backhaul for sending large data. And so Direct Connect is the Amazon name for connecting up high-speed connections. And then Route 53 is for like DNS and stuff like that. So here's the main thing you want to get into is ECS2. This is a fairly simple environment because I haven't really built a lot of things. This is my personal environment. My professional one, there's a few other things involved. So we have, the key things to understand here is the number of instances that you're running. So you can see I'm running one instance. I just fired it up just a little while ago. I have a few instances that I've created out there. And the way Amazon runs this is when you're running an instance, it's actually consuming CPU, you're charged for that. If you want to shut it down, then you don't get charged for it. Okay, so there's a big incentive to just shut everything down all the time. All right, so I don't run stuff very often. I just fire it up when I need it. And there's a whole rigmarole about, well, what other services can you get? So like data transfers and stuff like that, you have certain limits, and then you're charged for it. There's limits on like the elastic IP. There's also things you can set up like virtual private networks and things like that. And there's this is all virtual, right? So it's really cool that you can set up your own virtual network, your own configured environment, and then isolate that from another environment. Or set up your own private connection that nobody else can see between different environments. They have this whole thing set up with different physical locations. So they have one in Virginia, they have one here, they have one there. So that way you can physically separate things and put them in different disaster zones, right? So you don't want to have all your equipment, you know, so like if there's a big company that has all of their computer equipment in Dearborn, right? Now, nobody would ever do that, right? You know, it'd be kind of silly. You might have one you know, tragedy that wipes all your computer equipment out. So they have these different zones of places you can put things. And it costs a little bit for each of the different places, things like that, you know. So, well, but the thing is that as an individual, you'll be able to go out to Amazon, and the web address is aws.amazon.com. The AWS, if you don't put the ad in, it'll take you to the retail place, and that doesn't really, no, so aws.amazon.com. And if you want to try this out, you get like a year for free services, and you can bring up an instance. There's certain instances that are small instances. They have names for all the different sizes and stuff. So there's the small, the extra large, and the, you know, put pepperoni on it. I don't know what these different things. So there's lots of different, you know, things, and they have like E1, E2, and these prefixes on there to tell you things like, well, what happens if you hit the CPU limit on that device? Their newer way of doing that is they'll just charge you more. You know, they'll give you more, but they'll charge you. The old way they do it is they limit it, and they, you know, so people didn't like that because their systems weren't running very fast. And so this is a very fast system, and it's, what do they say? It's 9 nines of reliability. So everything's redundant and all that good stuff. So let me just attempt to show you. So the first thing you want to do when you're trying this out is you want to go down here to key pairs. And so I have several of these key pairs. I'm going to do like they do in some of the cooking shows and say, well, here's how we make this cake, and here's what we put in the oven, and oh, by the way, here's what it looks like when it comes out of the oven. Because it takes a little while. So the key pair, you do a generate key pair, and it's a pretty simple thing. You give it a name, hit, click create, and then you can download a key pair to your PC, all right? So, and I've done that a couple times. I've got some out there. And so there's another way you could do it, and it's a little bit more cumbersome, but it gives you a little bit more control. Use a key pair generator. I happen to like, what do I call it, PuttyGen. PuttyGen is a real cool little tool made by the people who do putty. We all know putty as a terminal emulation software that's very popular. And so it allows you to generate a key pair. And again, I'm not going to do the cake cooking thing and say, we press the generate, and then in this tool, it does thing where you have to move a mouse around. So it has some randomness that it can use. And then it pops out a file, then you name the file. And there's the main thing to remember about generating a key pair in PuttyGen is there's going to be a key phrase that you need to put in. You know, A, B, C, D, you know, I love Lucy, or whatever it is, right? You have to remember that. If you forget what that is, when you go to connect up to your instance, it'll request that. If you don't know what it is, you won't connect. And there's no way to get it back. If you don't know what the key phrase is when you create your or generate your key, you do not get it back. That instance, you might just destroy it. Okay, so I've created a key pair ahead of time. You can see I've got several of them out here. Once you have the key pair, you can go up and create an instance. So there's different things that you can see up here to create all kinds of good stuff. So I go to the dashboard, and there's a real easy thing to find called Launch Instance. If I hit that button, it gives me a list of the common types of instances that you can create. There are lots of these. This is just a small number of them that are just the common ones that they seem to offer up. You can see there's a little black box under several of them that says free tier eligible. That's what I was talking about earlier, is you as an individual for a year can get a free instance. So I think that's like 720 hours per month. So I think 720 is like always running. So you get one instance that you can run all the time. But I'd be careful. Sometimes you create something like the static IP, the elastic IP, and it charges you for that. So you might see charges on your account that you didn't expect. The other thing is like a virtual private community kind of thing where you set up special VPNs and things like that. Some of those things will cost you money. So just be aware that you get free, but then if you do something extra, it'll cost extra. So I usually go down and find a Ubuntu thing, and I'll tell you the reason I do Ubuntu as well, because I'm familiar with it, and I like Ubuntu, but then I also know what the user ID is. So when you go spin this thing up, there's nothing here that tells you how to connect to this thing. You have to know the user ID, and you have to figure out this way of connecting with the key, and that basically is very simple. You just have to remember what that ABC I love you thing is, or I love Lucy, or whatever it was. If you don't remember what that key phrase is, of course, again, you have to throw it away. So when I select this, it brings me to a screen that allows me to just kick off the thing by a quick review, and that's all the defaults on that are pretty reasonable. I wouldn't have any problem with creating one with just the defaults. So I'll walk you through what some of the things are that it does, but for the most part, it's just a plug and play, click the next button, unless you want to do something special. Unless you want to create your own virtual private environment, right? Unless you want to set up a subnet for this thing. You can auto-assign public IP addresses. There's IPAM roles, things like that. A lot of wonderful stuff that you can do to make this better. I haven't bothered. I mean, I haven't been at this long enough to really understand what would be helpful for me. So I just walk through and walk through the next steps here. So you can add additional size for the disks, and there's also SSD options and things like that. I haven't really bothered to worry about any of that stuff. There's like you can encrypt the disk drives, and so there's a tag. So the tag is just basically some label. I understand it's a good idea if you have a lot of different instances to use what they call a tag. It just puts a little label out there so that you can understand what things are. So if you have a special project and you want to make sure LTSP project 5 is something you can find your instance for, you just tag it. So security groups, there's a lot of information about security groups, and the basic concept is, basically you have control over how your users are connecting and who they belong, what organizations they belong to, and things of that nature. The one thing I would take out of this is don't leave this as anywhere. When you put down anywhere, that means anybody can touch that instance. So you want to figure out, you guys know what a CIDR is? It's like a part of an IP address with a slash, and something tells how big the area of that. So there's a thing called CIDR. So you put something in there to say who can get to this thing. So you want to figure out what community of people will get to this. And so
that's fine if you got a static IP, but if you don't.
And that's a great point. And
but if they don't have your key pair, they're not going to get to it. It depends on what services you're running.
Okay, so in my universe, I have customers that are one-to-one type of thing. So in another environment, maybe there are people all over the world who have to be able to hit your instance, right? So if you're using a web server, maybe the web services you want to allow anybody to access.
Right.
SSH, you might want to lock it down a little better than that, though.
Yes.
So the way around that is maybe to get some other system that you use as your jump box, right? And then use the jump box to get to this thing. And the jump box has a static IP, and then you can really lock down that jump box somehow. So a real easy thing to do here is just use my IP, and it will take your current IP. So I'm at the library, right? And your point is, well, what if you have an IP that changes? And so I won't be able to get to the instance later on, right? But you have the ability to go in with your console. That's that thing I was looking at ahead of time, and tweak things. You could go in and create another group and that type of thing. So you have some control outside of the actual instance to how that instance is hit and stuff.
Sure.
So then I'm done. So you have the security group here, right? So this security group might be open to everybody. It might be locked down to a certain address IP list or whatever. And so I'm ready to launch this thing. And so you go through and basically, does everything look good? You can bring out all the details here that you just went over and make sure everything looks good. So at this point now, there's the request to match the instance to a key pair. So like I said, I created one ahead of time, right? It was a fairly straightforward kind of thing. Just make sure you copy the
May I have your attention? The time is now 8:30, and the library will be closing in 30 minutes at 9 p.m. Please be advised that the internet connections will shut down approximately 10 minutes before closing. Thank you.
That's why I wanted to do my demo before I went through all my slides. So here I can go through and say I'm going to choose an existing one, and then I can find the one that I created earlier and just launch the instance with that key pair. Now what the launching the instance will do is it'll wait a while and kick around and do some fun stuff. And why it's not coming up here, I don't know.
There's a checkbox that you
Oh, the
acknowledge.
checkbox, I acknowledge, yeah, I have the key pair, so I just want to make sure that you have the key pair and that you understand what that means, and so they're not liable for you losing your instance. So now it's launching the instance. That's all it took to create a computer, right? And so I can go and I can watch how it's progressing, right? So right now I've got this other one that was running from before. I've got this one that's pending. You can see the little dial going round and round. You see it's initiating, all those good things. Now this is the way to work the console. You click on the instance that you're interested in. It brings up details about that instance. And you can see there's just a few things down here that it tells you. And so let me try to move this screen up a little bit more so you can. I'm having trouble with my finger is there. So the one thing that to start with is status check. So status check, I'm waiting for, there's two things that say initiating with a little hourglass next to them. Those have to turn green and say, yeah, it looks good. And you can't get to the instance until that's done. So rather than sitting here waiting 5 minutes for this thing to go up, I'm going to connect to this other guy that I have up here. You can see that there's 2 of 2 checks. That's the status checking it's doing down here. You see these two? We go from initiating to, yeah, okay, everything looks okay, and then this column status checks will say 2 of 2 checks. So this instance was the one I created earlier. You can see I've got an IP address here. So the way to connect to that is fairly straightforward. And this is what it looks like after you've connected. If I wanted to show you how to actually connect to it, I'll show you here. Get rid of that for now. So I'm taking the IP address and seeing it over here, this 5291. So I'm just going to type that in manually. And again, remember that it will change if you shut down the system. Now, the other tricky part, and this is a thing about PuTTY that's really weird, is you want to find the place to enter the key file, right? So here you have this SSH. If you click on the words SSH, you get like a sub-menu, right? Under the sub-menu, you have this thing called auth. Now you'd think that, oh, you'd click on the little plus sign there, and then there'd be something down here you click on. No, click on auth, right? Very kind of non-intuitive thing. That's just a PuTTY thing. Now you go through here and say, okay, browse. Now I can browse around and try to find my files and all that stuff. And you can see I've got a couple of them out there from before.
Do you have to use PuTTY?
No, I'm using
Windows.
an SSH type of environment. Yeah, you can use any of the other tools that in this case it's a Linux. So whatever you're connecting to, whatever it has on it, So if you want to do a web browser, you use a HTTP, HTTPS.
No, I'm talking about for SSH
No,
key
you can-
exchange. Do you
No,
have
you
to
can
use
do
a
that.
PuTTY key, or can you use a regular SSH key?
I use Sigma at work, it works fine.
Okay.
Right, so
Yeah, if you have Linux, you just run SSH.
You
use
do
SSH key gen.
Yeah, you can do it directly.
Yeah.
You can use the pair that they generate for you. You can generate from the website. Create a key
Okay.
right there.
Yeah, it's all, shall we say, industry standard SSH.
Yeah.
Nothing funny.
I thought
Yeah, I think
PuTTY
you-
had a
How do you
variation.
They're
on
standard
there, too.
keys. They're standard keys. You can import them into
Yeah.
Linux and use them in Linux just fine.
Yeah, you can generate them in Linux and import them into PuTTY.
Right, yeah.
It doesn't care.
Okay.
So I don't really care either. It's pretty much whatever works, right?
Yeah.
Right, right. Well, there you go. You get
So
something
I've connected to my thing. I have to put the
Oh, 'cause that's the default user creates.
So this is the default user ID for Ubuntu. It's Ubuntu. And then here, I have to remember the ABC I Love Lucy thing, right? So I have to remember this key phrase, otherwise it's not going to work. And they're in.
And there you're in.
So I've created an instance in just a few minutes. So, you know, one of the things we try to show at work is, well, you know, it takes like months to go through the finance and all that stuff to get an instance and to make stuff, you know, for a physical device, right? I'm still working on trying to get some hardware that we had to get the boss to sign it. Oh, do we have to have this other boss sign it? Yeah, you better have that other boss. Well, we better have the governance group look at this. And, well, what about the security people? And, oh, you know, it's like, I don't know.
No, this month we're like an IBM
Right.
instead of HP.
So this little instance environment that we have is pretty easy. It's, you know, we set up like, it's almost like a credit card type of thing, right? So when you sign up for this Amazon thing, you have to have a credit card. It won't let you in. And I think this is the one that calls you on the phone, and you have to enter in a number that it gives you on the phone. You know, so there's various ways of doing security, and this is a kind of an interesting one. So you have to give it a cell phone or a phone number, and then it has to call you back and give you a number, and then you have to type that in. So just a little thing on Putty, just for a second. So Putty and Putty Gen, if you go to your favorite search engine and put in Putty or Putty Gen, it'll be the first thing that comes up. And so the Putty folks are, you know, kind of blatantly, you know, saying you will see this as the first one on your search. So you look at it, it's like, it's this really weird, you know, URL, right? So this whole long thing is the URL. And people say, well, why don't you come up with a better URL? They don't have to. You know, if you go read the FAQ for Putty, it is wild. They are just like, you know, someone asked, well, is it ever going to be available on iPhone? I said, no, we don't have one of those. They don't have anybody who owns an iPhone, so they're not going to develop on it. So, you know, this is the one and only Putty that you really want. If you do what I did and do a search on Putty and bring up some other website and download it and throw it onto your system, there's going to be advertisements and garbage in it, right? So this is the Putty. It's got Putty, you know, in this case of Windows, it's got the EXE and that stuff. So now let me jump over to so that part's done. This is the main thing I really wanted to show you is how to, you know, create an instance and, you know, get to it, right? So now you all are, you know, Amazon AWS capable. You can go out there. There's nothing preventing you just putting in a credit card and, you know, basically signing up for the service, going into the console and finding all these little bits and things like that and making it happen and at no cost, right? I do have 10 slides of stuff that came up during my visit to Chicago here in June.
Before you get to that, you gave them a credit card just because you have to do that to sign up. But
Yes.
you have, did you say a year free?
Yeah, I think it's a year where you get to do their
And
free
you could
stuff.
play with some of the smaller end machines?
Yes, so small, and they have all these different names for different machines, so a lot of them qualify. And there's a whole other universe of other stuff going on. So there's vendors who have their packaged software on the thing that you can then load up. So I did that with WordPress, right? So there's a WordPress entity out there that just loaded stuff up, and you can throw it into an environment and have it running in just a few minutes.
And at the end of the year, they're gonna start digging your credit card.
Well, so you have to be careful about which services you sign. So then there's going to be, you get this little piece, and then everything else costs money and things like that. There's also, what do you call this? Where you can put in, you can request funding type of thing or an environment where you get CPU time if it goes below a certain cost. So like it's like an eBay
like bidding
for
for your
CPU
CPU
use,
time,
right?
yeah.
So right, if you could say, okay, I want CPUs at 10 cents per CPU click, and if the price drops down that far, that you get it. So if you have like some big hunk of data that you need to go through, you have a whole lot of processing you want to do, you can just set up your instance and say, okay, when the price gets down to this price point, start executing. And then when the price goes up above it, it will kill out.
That's pretty neat.
Yeah, it's like, you know, voting on what your price point is. So a very cool thing. So here I am, I'm a Linux addict, and I'm using Windows because it's my new laptop, and I'm just having fun playing with it. And so I created a PDF, and I started this thing up, and it's got a lot of stuff. I mean, so let me just start off by saying that Amazon is, you know, it's a wonderful solution. As I say, there's some specific things that you want to, you know, understand if you're going to start playing with this. You know, the discovery is an issue for lawyers, and you have problems where they might overbill you. One of the things my boss is saying is, yeah, but I need to have a budget. I want to be able to stop using it if I hit, you know, if I exceed my budget. I can't spend more money than I've been allocated, right? And I can't do that. You can set up all kinds of alerts, right, that tell you you're getting close, shut your stuff down. But if it's the weekend or you're on vacation or something like that, guess what? You're gonna spend more money than was in your budget.
So there's no stop loss kind of a thing.
Right, there's no way of.
You have to automate that
I
on
mean,
your
so
end.
now you could probably hire a service to do that though, right?
More budget.
You have the alert set somewhere and use the API to turn your machine off though, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, you'd have to have some tooling
Is
for it.
is there a way to run an automated application that would check all these figures?
Yeah, so they have something that will notify you. I'm sure you can use the Lambda service to kick off, here's an event that has occurred, let's, shut everything down.
Instead of you watching it, the app that you've designed,
Yep.
or is available?
I'm sure someone does,
and-
there's tons of vendors out there. I went to this thing and they had, the room was twice as big as our room here, with every table was, some of it was fantastic. They had these big displays, and, Cloud Checker was a big one, and they have all these little tools for checking what's going on in your cloud. And so Amazon, these other vendors say that their environment is more secure than yours is, right? So they have everything locked down. If you wanna do like a port scan or something like that, you can't do that on Amazon. They won't want you to do that. If you're gonna let them do a port scan, you have to let them know ahead of time so they can shut off all their, emergency
Safety
warning
checks,
stuff.
yeah.
You see like, the Star Trek Enterprise, the whoop, 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 So they have a lot of things that they have available. And
You've got about 2 minutes. I
yeah,
think.
okay,
Less
so
than
and I've
that.
got 10 slides. You can see that there's all kinds of different services that they're doing, right? Disaster recovery is one of the things that they're offering up, and say you have a warm system, you can have a cold system,
Sure.
you can have all this stuff up there, and so they have, actual prices for this, in this slide here. So, for $309 a month, you can have a direct connect pilot light thing, which is just, a real, a system that's, a warm system with a, real good connection and stuff like that, just sitting there waiting for you. It's a whole bunch of different things that are optimizing, getting your system set up properly. So service-oriented architecture was another big presentation there. So one of the things you want to be aware of is if you're taking an existing old application and you're moving it to the cloud, if it's not designed for the cloud, there's going to be a big bill to make that move, right? Very careful about just taking old stuff and throwing it into the cloud if it's not designed to do that. So it could be more pricey. I've heard things, oh yeah, Amazon's so cheap. It's, well, yeah, the CPU cycles are cheap, and some of the services for storing data is cheap. But if you're just going to throw something in there, then you have to be careful about it. And there are services, there's companies that will take your virtual machines on premises and put them in the cloud for you with this wonderful tooling and all that. Wonderful. I think I've got a slide on that too. So security and hacking, I think, mentioned that they think that they're better than you are, and, well, that's not the way to say it. I mean, they think their security is really good. So you're not likely to run into a risk, according to them. And they can watch stuff for you. They have monitors and stuff like that to help you. If something goes wrong, they'll let you know. So this Cloud Checker, and there's the guy's name and all that stuff. So the key management, there's a whole information overload on how this all could be worked out and more eliminate and fix vulnerabilities. And so they're watching this stuff. There's something like this Heartbleed or something like that in their environment. They will go in and make it fixed, right? So so you don't have to do as much administration on the infrastructure side, right? They have some new services coming out, Beanstalk, so they have development environments, cloud formation. This is a whole catalog of different things that you can integrate in, and then there's the versatile private gateways. So again, you can set up your own private little areas and manage that as much as you want to. You can lock things up so that only this cluster can do something and only that cluster. So what they were suggesting is much like the traditional environment, you have a back end that's really highly protected. You have a front end that might be more exposed, and these two things can talk to each other without anybody else hitting them or finding them. So that's what I had prepared as my presentation.
Is there any way you can share that, or is it really confidential, like it says in the bottom?
Yeah, so this is the formatted document that I grabbed, so I don't really think this is confidential. All these bullet points that I grabbed were presented at the Amazon.
If you could share that on the mailing list, that'd be cool.
Yeah, I will find a way to share.
I'd love to read it in detail.
I've heard about this thing called, what is it, something share.
Slideshare.
SlideShare.
Slideshare.net.
Yeah, so maybe I didn't count on that.
May I have your attention? The time is now 8:45, and the library will be closing in 15 minutes at 9 p.m.
How about
The
that?
library
Done
internet
before.
connection will shut down approximately 10 minutes before
Yes,
closing.
I'm good, thank you.
So, do
You
we
are
want to do
using
a
one
few
of the
minutes of
library's
questions, or we
computers.
really need to?
No, we need to get out of here. We need to
Questions?
do-
Yeah. Go ahead and ask your, have them ask questions.
Dinner at Red Lobster, so I'll be there.
Also arrived.
Okay,
Please do not
Excellent,
announce.
thank you.
We have some giveaway.
Yes.